Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give a couple of minutes to let everybody get logged in, and then we will kick off in a couple of minutes here. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll be kicking off here in a couple of minutes, just giving everybody a chance to get logged in and join us so we can all start on one page. Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Webinar Wednesday brought to you by Zintegra. I hope everybody can see my screen all right. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off. I do want to let you know that we have a treat. We have two of our partner community here today to talk about our solutions and how we can help things within the environments for you and your digital workspace. We have IGEL with us and Login BSI. So this is going to make for an interesting conversation today. So as usual, welcome. Just so you're aware, again, we have the Bronco giveaway. Just so you know, we're closed for the 2022 giveaway, but we will have it open for the new one coming soon. So just keep with the link and checking in with us. And I'm sure on one of these Wednesdays, we'll make that announcement for you. So you'll be prepared. I'm your host. If you don't know me, John Spallone. I've been with Zintegra now for about a year in the Baltimore Mid-Atlantic area. I've been in the digital workspace area for 20 plus years now, everything from shared publish applications and desktops all the way up throughout the entire world of your digital workspace and providing in solutions. I've worked within that from cloud offerings. I've started out as a consultant, architect. I've gone up into all of these different realms and worlds recently, from Citrix, where I worked with enablement for partners, customers, and Citrix internal globally, when it came to cloud solutions and how it integrated with the digital workspace arena. I Dad jokes, I've got them. I give them to my kids. They hate them, but hey, that's what dads are for. And then I find that balance of zenness between my nerdiness and my geekness. So if there's anytime you want to have a conversation with it, feel free to reach out to me. So with that said, XenTegra, who are we? If you don't know, you'll get a little background. If you do know, welcome. You're going to get some more background. We are a solutions provider. We deal with reselling solutions, again, focused within that digital workspace arena, EUC solutions, your MDM solutions, also from a security standpoint, approaches from zero trust. We also do professional services where we work with those solutions, or we work with our partners on those solutions. And we also have our own hosting capability that we provide in our own data centers, and we can manage and maintain your environments for you if that's something that you're looking for. XenTegra, you'll see here our founder, Andy Whiteside. He came from Citrix as well. And what he saw was there was a lack of enablement and understanding from technologies and solutions, how that works with you, the customer, to be able to deliver these solutions to your customers. So there was that gap of how do we provide an answer to the solutions that are out there, and how do we make sure that you're making the right choices? And by doing that, that's where we come from, is making sure that you're aware of what's out there. Not every solution fits every single person or every scenario. And that's why we have a very vast portfolio to be able to help you and support you for what fits your environment, your needs, and your requirements. We offer complimentary assessments, managed services, and consulting services, and as well as, like I said, value-added reseller. We work both within our cloud, the public cloud, and your hybrid cloud arena. So with that said, what I'm going to do now is hand this over to Blair and Christopher, who are here today with us, both from IGEL and Login VSI, to be able to open up and talk about the solutions and how it works within the community. So gents, I'm going to go ahead and stop my sharing. Hello, Blair.
Hello, thanks, John. Hey, Chris, and hello, everybody that's with us today. Let me do a quick screen share. And then, John, if you could confirm that you can see my slide.
Yes, sir. See it fine.
Cool. So yeah, you can see the happy guy with the baseball hat on. That's me. You might notice in my video that I'm not wearing a t-shirt. So, yep, I'm one of those diehard remote workers that realize I can pretty much work from anywhere in the world. So why not choose my two favorite spots, Colorado and Costa Rica? Today, however, I am dialing in from Colorado. So, you know, I've been with Login VSI for about 6 years now. I've been a master systems engineer throughout most of my career for the last 15, 20 years, working for a lot of the big names that we know, HP, Seagate, Compaq, if you guys remember back then, Digital. And so I've made my way via many different kinds of solutions. And lately it's been VDI, a lot of VDI solutions. And in my tenure here at Login VSI, I've done a lot of product stuff, but lately it's been strategic partnership. So working with folks like IGEL to develop the integration with our platform and into theirs, and then also have been doing just a lot of AVD lately, and that's been a lot of fun too. So what I'm going to talk about today has to do with not just kind of designing the solution and stress testing. If you've heard of Login VSI, you might have heard of us being used in a lot of vendor reference architectures, or doing a lot of benchmarking. Benchmarking in the sense that we want to be able to scale up an environment and see how it handles the stress of that environment. Well, there are a lot of other factors at play in a VDI solution that are bigger than just how many sessions can I get on a particular environment. You may be asking yourself, what is the experience like for remote users that are geolocated around the world? And if they're connecting into workspaces that may be located in some central locations, they could end up with different user experiences depending on, the routes between them and the data center, what's going on with the networking at the data center or storage or even their own Wi-Fi devices. So there's a lot of things that we can do outside of just stress testing that can enable us to really get a nice picture of what that end user experience is like remotely around the world. And then lastly, there are other types of things that you might want to know, like if I update my Windows 10 image or if I update from Windows 10 to Windows 11, which is something I've been doing a lot of testing on lately. You might see that some of the business applications or line of business applications that you would like to be able to use on that Windows 11 image may or may not work as expected. So it would be really nice for you to be able to test those applications quickly and get a feel for, do they work well in this environment? And if they don't, where are they hanging up? Is it a performance issue? When a user interacts with that application, are they running into some issues? So we do everything from application testing to load testing, all the way to what we call continuous testing, and I'll explain that in a bit. Now, when we're talking about a modern digital workspace architecture, you can see here that it's a layer cake that's just awfully tall, right? And a lot of the VDI admins, the virtualization admins will own a piece of this, but this really is kind of a community-driven type of support approach when we talk about the VDI stack. Now, when we're talking about things that may change or things that we have to be aware of when we're talking about an increased work from home culture or cloud compute solutions, everything that you see being pointed to here in this stack is going to be located perhaps somewhere different, especially if we're going to a cloud. So many of these items might be within somebody else's control. And then many of them could be within your control as well. But the thing to really note is that many of these things will go through pretty systematic and regular changes. And it doesn't take all of them to change to really hit your problem. It could just be one of these things, right? For example, if you get a new antivirus update that targets a particular component of an application you would like to use, or if your profile solution, whether that's something like FS Logics, it does that, if that changes, how will that impact my users logging in and logging out? These are all answers that we can get without disrupting our production environment. And just last year, there were over 2,000 changes in Windows 10 alone. So if you can think about, all of the different components in this stack changing, if Windows changes 2,000 times, how many are these changing in the stack? And when you kind of accumulate all of those, any one of those changes could potentially break or slow down your environment. So what I'm here to talk about is how can we figure out how those changes impact us before we move any of them into production. And of course, the reasons why we love working with our partners IGEL on this kind of stuff is because they're sitting at the top of the stack. They're just as just as impacted at the front end, in front of the user, by all of these layers changing as the users would be, right? Because the user is going to be logged into an IGEL endpoint, and if any one of these components underneath that endpoint is broken or is going through change that's disruptive, we're going to have these clients sitting up here or these end users sitting up here on their IGEL devices saying, hey, things aren't working properly, and I'm going to blame the IGEL device because that's what's in front of me, right? It's been something that we've been dealing with, with the likes of Citrix for quite some time, where it's whatever that last endpoint is in front of you is typically what they think is the broken part, but it's really not, right? So this is about finding out or making sure all of these are solid and making sure we understand if anything breaks before that moves into a production strategy. So what we're doing is we're adopting this this methodology that we call shift left. As you might imagine, we have pre-production and production types of methods when we're pushing out changes. You try and capture as many of those as you can in pre-production, but it's typical that when you have many components like you saw on the last slide, you're not really rolling those all up into one and giving that a final test. Typically, you're going to push that into production and hope they all work together, which is this traditional quality model. And in this traditional quality model, the farther you go into production, the more you're going to impact productivity and the higher the cost of that defect is going to be, because the cost of that defect is going to be lost business and things like that. So what we're trying to do is move most of this testing to the left and test the entire stack before you push that into production. And the cool thing about this is if you can automate that, then what you're dealing with is being able to flesh out any issues before you're pushing that into production. And because it's automated, you can do these changes very rapidly, understand what they're going to do, and quickly get on top of that before it even gets anywhere close to that production. Now, there are a number of test strategies that we have in place that we advocate for this shift left strategy. It starts with application compatibility testing. Again, does my application work on this new Windows image, for example? I may have, 10, 20, 2,000 applications that may be jeopardized by a change, such as going from Windows 10 to Windows 11. So I'm going to want to test that application, and I'm going to want to do more than just make sure it starts. So what I'm going to do is start the application, interact with that application with our real user technology, like log in or open a file or modify a file or patient record or something like that, and then exit. And if there's any issues throughout that entire workflow, then we're going to let you know about that. And again, you can quickly jump on top of that issue and fix that before it moves farther to the right. After you do the application compatibility testing and your image is great with all your apps, then you're going to look at the single host performance testing. How many sessions can I get on this single host? And then we're going to kind of move farther to the right as we test things at more simultaneously, right? So instead of one application one time or one host for multiple sessions, then we're going to move into this user acceptance testing where we have many users working with these applications and interacting with these at more of a simultaneous level where you have many users doing this at the same time. And then scale up to your total solution to make sure that that works to hit your peak concurrency. And then lastly, we have a concept called continuous testing. So continuous testing is basically taking these tests that you have put together here in your pre-production phase and issuing them in a small quantity, maybe 1 or 2 virtual users or a handful into your production environment so that you can get some feedback on what that production environment looks like. For example, I had a virtual user log in to an AVD environment running on a burstable instance because I know burstable instances are going to be impacted when there are other resources that are needing, the compute that they're entitled to. So what you see here up in the top right is a virtual user, and this is the total login time. And we see on Friday the total login time is less than about 60 seconds. Throughout the weekend, we're still we're kind of getting up to about 60 seconds. But then you can see right here on Monday, right when the peak workflow is hitting and people are logging into this East US 2 data center, you can see that my login times are getting dramatically erratic. They're definitely increasing to a point where users would be very unhappy. So that's kind of the benefit of continuous testing. And this works great when you combine our Login Enterprise product with IGEL. So it's a real good way of monitoring, or not just monitoring, but getting a sense of how things are running in a production environment without having to rely on your human users. Now, how do virtual users work? So basically, we're reproducing a human element, a human interaction through software, through some scripting. And we can put together a number of different applications in a workflow. So, a user's not just going to typically sit on a workspace and use one application. They're going to use multiple applications, typically all at once. So that's what we call kind of that daily behavior. And then we have this concept of feeling. So how responsive is this workspace, and how reactive is it? When I open an application, how long does it take to open? When I click on a button, how long does it take to render the screen that I'm expecting to see? the virtual users can feel all of those things and report on, is this slowing down? Is it speeding up? Is it taking too long? Those are the kind of things that you get with these virtual users. Now, Login Enterprise is much easier to deploy than our classic Login VSI product, which is being sunsetted. Login Enterprise is where it's at now. And we have a wizard-driven approach to this. It's all virtual appliance based. So it's super easy to get deployed and quick to get deployed. And it's more than just a logon, as I said, about the workflows. You can have a user log on, open up applications, interact with them, and move on to another application before it logs off. And that's kind of what we call workloads. And we have a number of these applications already built into our product, so you don't have to create them for yourself. A good example would be the Microsoft 365 applications. Now, the cool thing, again, is that you can test all of these apps together to understand how do these apps interact and what happens to the workspace when you have a lot of users with all of these apps open. And then lastly, if you happen to have any bespoke or critical line of business applications that aren't in the standard suite of included workflows for us, you're certainly welcome to add your own. And it's fairly easy to create yours. We're always here to help if you'd like, but you can definitely include that in the workflows that you'd like to choose. Now, from a pre-production testing perspective, we're looking at testing app compatibility again. Do they run? Do the apps run? Do they perform the same with a new Windows 10 release? What are the difference between this release and the last release? And let me focus on that third point because that's really important. Being able to see what something was at its baseline or before you made the change and compare that to something after you made the change is a great way to determine what you need to do with your next steps. Do I need to go back to the drawing board and see how I can fix this issue? Or if it performs the same as it did before, great, I'm going to move on. And then load testing at scale. How many sessions can I get per session host or per VDI host before performance falls off? We got some great new features for that. And if you have a cloud instance, how does that look? How does it perform? How can I pick the right instance that's the best cost for my enterprise? And there's a little architecture under there, but let's blow it up a little bit. So you have this Login Enterprise Virtual Appliance. You have this concept of launchers, and this is where our IGEL integration lives, is in these Login Enterprise launchers. More on that in a little bit. You have a Workspace connection server, so typically that's going to be like Citrix Storefront or Citrix Cloud or Horizon connections, things like that, Azure Virtual Desktop, and then it's going to connect you to the host pool on the back end. So the virtual appliance will say, hey, launchers, create a session to that workspace and make a connection all the way to that target and start to exercise that target. It's a real simple architecture. Let's take a little bit deeper look at how that applies when we're using this in a pre-production, let's say a load test scenario. Now, one of the really cool things about IGEL is that you have these little UD pocket devices. And if you'd like to do a scale test and you have some hardware on the shelves, or if you'd like to convert maybe a decommissioned laptop and put that at a remote location, you can certainly do that. But you can quickly convert these machines with the UD Pocket software and turn them into these launchers that I talked about. Now imagine I want to do 350 plus sessions to a backend host to see if it can handle that much volume in terms of the compute resources that are needed. So the way that that's going to work is these little UD pockets would be started up. You would discover them in UMS. You would apply a profile for Login VSI or Login Enterprise to them. We'll show you that. And then once they're converted into these launchers, then you can just have the virtual appliance say, hey, launchers, I'd like you to establish many sessions to that backend host pool, really drive it hard, and that way we can see how that host pool is going to be responding to that pressure. And when you get all of that working, in mass, then what you see here are these launchers that are establishing sessions to the backend host. And here we've just got a ton of sessions opened up against that backend host. They're logged in. They're running applications against that host in order to determine how it responds to all of that pressure. So that's what the launchers look like. Now, from a production testing perspective, there's this different concept of continuous testing. So again, you have IGEL endpoints that could be located all around the world. These endpoints could establish sessions to the backend targets and test how that feels from that remote location all the way through the target, and make sure that all of the applications work for that user from that location. And here you can see we even have kind of like a map view where you can look at maybe all of the remote sites that you might be supporting and determine really quickly whether they're working well or not, right? So you can get this from current monitoring software, but remember, our virtual users run 24/7 by 365, and they're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So if performance falls off, or you notice a region start to go red, but the rest are okay, that's a really good way to jump into an issue before it becomes a major issue or an outage, right? A red could just mean something starting to slow down. You can quickly go to that. I'll show you in a live demo, and then determine what is it that's slowing down, and do I need to take action before it impacts our production users? So really, really good production type of sensor that tells you what your production environment is looking like. So these are some of the things that you can kind of determine. From an IGEL perspective, this architecture would look similar to the last, except you're going to have a lot of different remote locations that are running either IGEL endpoints, as you see at the cafe and home, maybe a remote office that has multiple devices, maybe a UD Pocket and an endpoint, and all of these locations can be supported. So basically, again, our Login Enterprise Virtual Appliance would say, hey, IGEL endpoint, I want you to launch a session from you, the endpoint, to your target, which is the desktop pool or the workspace connections that I would like to test. And then once that makes a connection, again, virtual users will do their performance testing and provide that feedback back to the virtual appliance for a heads-up display that kind of gives you a good idea of what's slowing down, what's not working, what's looking good. Again, really good in order to take some quick action on issues that you might be seeing. So enough of the slides for now. Let's take a look. So I'm not going to walk you through how to set up the testing in this live demo, but I want to show you two things. Number one, how do I set up a workflow? And then what does the reporting look like when I do this type of testing? So here you see that we have the Login Enterprise Virtual Appliance. This is the web interface. You can see, after you get it installed, you're going to get a login that looks very similar to this. And once you log in, it's going to take you to our home page. And once you're on the home page, you would use this middle section, configuration, to set up your users, your virtual users, the applications, the launchers. This is where the IGEL stuff lives, and construct your tests. And then in this results page, this is where we would look at some of the reporting. And then the rest is just for kind of some other operations. But what I want to show you is, again, how do we construct these workflows? So let's go into a test. I have one running right now, and you can see we have some virtual users that are logged in. One of the virtual users is actually currently using Excel. You have another one browsing the web. You had another one that was using Word but is currently signing out. So if we go back, let's take a look at a workflow, and I'm going to show you a load test workflow as an example. So in my case, I'm testing AVD again, and I'm using a custom connector. If we're using an IGEL connector, we can certainly use any of these as well. And what I'm going to show you is that workflow. So basically, you go down here and you say, okay, I want the virtual user to log in, maybe wait for 30 seconds while the login process is happening. After that wait, then I want that virtual user to open up Edge and browse some websites. This workflow is based on what I typically do in my working day. So I'm going to browse the web a little bit. Then I can also have another type of edge where maybe I run a high definition video, YouTube or something like that. If I wanted to turn that on, I could just quickly pick that. If I wanted to make that go first, I could just drag that into a different order. But you see, I'm logging into Edge. Then I'm going to open Outlook, check my email, maybe join a meeting on Microsoft Teams. So I've been developing a Teams workload that's available, and I've been doing a lot of testing in AVD. We've done some testing in Citrix too, where we're testing Teams. So join a conference call, maybe chat with some other users. Then I'm going to use Excel for maybe to do some type of data manipulation, Word to write my report, and then PowerPoint to do something like a presentation that I'm going to make to my peers. And I'm going to leave these apps running as I'm kind of going through this routine. So this routine, this workflow is going to be the same whether we're doing continuous tests, load tests, or application tests. Let's go back here again. So you've got the application testing. That's going to basically walk through it once. Let's take a look at that real quick. So we've got application testing. Again, the purpose of application testing is to take maybe my applications, I want to test those on a new image. Again, I could be updating Windows 10 from 1903 to something like 21H2. That's a big jump. I want to make sure that all my apps work well. So what I can do is run that application test. One virtual user is going to run through that workflow and try and discover if there are any issues. So I can get the report here. You can get some of the details about the test. You can see I ran a prep script, Outlook, Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. And we can check out the report. And so this report can be something you could send to other constituents within your workspace configuration and support team. So with testing this image, I can see that no apps failed, but some apps ran a little slower than I expected. I can see that login performance is well under the threshold. That's good. Round trip protocol latency, really good. So again, this is just a single test, and I already know a lot about what's going to happen. Okay, you can see the Outlook had a performance issue, but everything executed well. Great. Let's go check that out. So we can see that Outlook started okay. You can see that maybe there's a licensing issue, but it took longer than the 2 seconds that I had my threshold set to. Now, maybe that was a little unfair. Outlook can take a little while to start, especially if you have a lot of mail, a big OST or something like that. So maybe 2 seconds is a bit unreal, but I wanted you to see what it looks like when you cross a threshold. So you do get that, and you can make the determination, is 3.76 seconds okay for my end users? It might be, and you can say, well, this is a good test. So what does a test look like where maybe things went well? You can see that Excel started. We did a number of different operations during that test with Excel. We started the application, and you can see I have a threshold of 3 seconds. Actually, it was less than a second. I pulled the open file dialog. The reason why that's important is because when you open the open file dialog, it's going to have to look at each of your storage devices and determine, are there Excel files on those that it can use? So it's a really good test of your storage. So you got the open file window. I can see that storage is really banging, really quick. And well under my threshold. And then you have another storage operation here where you're opening a document or doing a read from that storage device, also well under my threshold, and then saving a file, which is another storage operation where I'm writing to a storage device. So just by having our users interacting can help us to understand how is our solution, that entire stack kind of responding to that end user. And if any of these is increased, like for example, my save file takes a very long time, that could be, antivirus getting in the way. That could be a slow storage device. Already we have some indicators of where we can go triage and really jump on top of any issues that are arising. So that is the application test. The next test that we'll take a look at is let's do load test, because the continuous test is more fun to look at the dashboard. So here's a load test that I'm doing. I'm working with an FS Logics solution in AVD now, and I want to kind of look at what do the results of that test look like. And I told you we had some new features in the product that help you with this type of testing. You can see the summary up here. We have what's called an EUX score. That's a new feature of Login Enterprise. So what we're going to do during a load test is we're going to start to ramp up the number of users, as you see here. I'm testing a 16 vCPU system, session host, and you can see as I'm ramping up those users, it really doesn't have too much an effect on my end user experience score. Now, as you might imagine, if the system is getting bogged down from too many users, you're going to see this end user experience score start to drop off, which is a bad thing. And so this end user experience score is a new thing. You can use this on physical devices. You can use this against larger scale. But this is a really good data point that quickly and easily, and one data point tells you what that end user experience is like all the way up at the top of the stack. So end user experience score, and then we have this concept of VSI max. So when this end user experience score drops off too much, like below a 5.5, then that's when we're going to say, hey, timeout. This session host can't handle that many sessions. We're going to cap it at whatever the number is that we put there at VSI max. Now, of course, during this test, you can get a lot more information, like how quickly are my applications responding? You can see that here, or what do my logins look like during the login ramp up phase, right? For AVD, this is pretty normal to be below 30 and not too bad. Again, as we start to ramp that up really high, though, that could change. So a lot of different information that you can collect from doing these types of load tests, and can be really insightful and valuable. If you do have issues, we'll show you some issues here. Maybe I can just quickly show you. Let's see. Okay, let me just quickly show you one that I had to cancel. But it really was when I was having some issues in my environment. So here you can see my active users. I started logging them on. I only got 9 logged on, but let's take a look at that EUX score. Ooh, you can see it starts to go down. It drops below 5. And we say, hey, there's a VSI max on this. Now, we don't give you a VSI max number because we really dropped off too quickly. But what would happen normally is if this didn't drop off too dramatically, it would say, okay, at this data point, like maybe right here, that would be your VSI max at about 5 sessions. So that's the kind of information you can get from the load tests. And then lastly, let me show you more of the operations feature. Now, this is where I think Login VSI with our Login Enterprise product really integrate well with IGEL. Being able to kind of get these remote sensors, get these devices out in remote locations, get them on IGEL endpoints can help us to get a really good feel for how that environment is responding to these users in these remote locations. I'll give you 2 examples. One, let's just say you're an airline and you have kiosks in these real remote locations where you're going to have people come in, and they're going to come in maybe an hour before they start boarding their passengers. Well, if they're only coming in an hour before they board their passengers and something is wrong at that terminal, where they can't get on the booking software to check in these passengers, then that's a real problem. They're going to miss their flight. They're going to lose some revenue. They're going to have to give away some money. Customer sat is down, all of that. So the cool thing about the solution that we can do with IGEL is that when that agent is not at that kiosk checking in passengers, we can say, okay, IGEL, I want you to push your virtual user or your login enterprise profile against that device while that agent isn't there. And I want you to make sure that that check-in software is always running so that when the agent gets there, they know it's going to work great. Okay, so that's one use case. Another would be a healthcare use case. So let's say you've got a practice management module for Epic, and you are at a clinic or a hospital, and you have an administrative desk that you walk into where they're going to check you in and make sure that all your documents are in order before you go back and see a doctor. Well, if that practice management application isn't working, then that could be a huge problem. Again, it's going to impact their bottom line. They're not going to get as many patients through, and that could be a really bad scenario. Well, what if that practice management software went down at midnight, and you had some of your administrators come in at maybe 30 minutes until the clinic opens? They're not going to have enough time in 30 minutes to make sure that practice management software is up and running successfully, and that could be a real issue. So again, spin up a virtual user, spin up an IGEL endpoint, where it switches from that administrator to this virtual user mode, where it's now logging into that practice management software between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. To make sure that that is always available and always responding well. If you had an issue at midnight, then we would report that. Operations team could get on that issue and fix it well before that administrator comes in. So there are a lot of ways that you can use this solution with IGEL to really make sure that you're not impacting your users. Now, from a continuous test perspective, the types of things that we can look at are application performance. Is the application responsive to the end user? Are any of the applications failing? Is the login performance good? If it's not, then we can say, it's above a particular threshold. And you get things like display protocol connection, profile loading, and GPO processing. You can also take a look at things over the span of an hour. We're not crossing a threshold, so everything's good there. You can see that I am getting some login failures. That's not good. And I have been testing a profile management solution that is causing some issues, and this is why I'm testing it. I'm trying to find these issues. So that's actually a good thing for me to know. And then round trip protocol latency. What's that protocol round trip time for those end users from their remote locations? Real valuable information, and you can see I'm getting that for 8 different launchers that are around the world. These could all be on IGEL endpoints. The other thing I want to show you is that for each application too, we get a little bit of a drill down into, things that our virtual user has been asked to remain sensitive to. So how long does it take to load a web page, for example? You can see that for this user, we have a threshold of 3 seconds, and every once in a while that's going above, but it tends to come back, right? So that's good information to have. If we started to see a trend where it broke above and didn't come down, we could get on top of that, fix it before it becomes a major issue. If we're looking at something like Word or Excel, here's an app start time for Word, or perhaps Excel, where we have these different interactions. Again, you can see how those change over time. I can see that these are all well under their threshold. Things are looking really nice. I do see that we had an issue here. The script was aborted because it couldn't find the file dialog, which can happen when when a system gets a little busy and doesn't quickly respond to that user. If you want to check out a little more about what that issue might have been, you can take a look at a screenshot. Look at that. This could happen because licensing has expired. This could happen because a change in the product, I updated it. You don't want this to get in front of your end users because they might be, well, wait, what's going on here? You're going to immediately get help desk tickets if this kind of stuff happens. So our virtual user said, hey, something went wrong here. I'm going to take a snapshot, get it back to you so you can fix it. Right, that's what we're looking at here. And of course, you could always pull the log too and get some even deeper information. So this is what that display looks like from an operations perspective. If I wanted to see what it looked like around the world or around, a state or the United States, you can see, here, if I wanted to check out a particular region, for example, I could just hover over that and see, what's the issue here. And you can see login failures are an issue. You can see here in Amsterdam, there are no issues. That's a good thing. You can even click on that and get an even deeper dive into that location, right? So we can see everything's doing well in that data center. So that's kind of a geographic review, and this is the workflows and the reporting that I promised to show you. Okay, just a couple more things before I hand it over to Christopher. Just wanted to show you how to get started with IGEL and Login Enterprise in a quick little step-by-step. So what you can do is download a virtual appliance. You go to our downloads page, and you'll see we have virtual appliances that can be imported into Zen Server, imported into ESX, imported into Hyper-V, and also imported into Azure. So we have virtual appliances already set up for you. We support some other hypervisors too. Just hit us up if you have some different ones that you'd like some support with. And then after that's imported, you just start up and initialize it. Already you're kind of looking at about the 30-minute mark. Not too bad. We've got instructions on how to do that setup and initialization. It's basically just clicking through 5 different prompts and answering 5 different questions about host name and networking. And then after it reboots a couple of times, for an IGEL setup, what you're going to do is go to the web UI. You're going to go to the Launchers tab. If you're curious about where the Launchers tab is, I can show you here. If I go to the home page, you can see there's a Launchers tab right here. And you can see I have my launchers set up. already. So you go to the launchers tab and you go all the way to the bottom here, and you can see we've got a launcher secret. So what I'm going to do is copy that launcher secret and then also get the URL of the virtual appliance that I need. So here's the URL of virtual appliance. I'm going to copy this launcher secret. And then after we do that, then we're going to go to the IGEL support article that we have here. Here's the link. And we're going to go to make sure that the firmware is IGEL OS 11 or greater. And after we do that, then what we can do, and Christopher is going to show you this firsthand, but you can go to the Login Enterprise accessory, enter in those 2 bits of information, save it, and then complete just a couple other steps that we outline here in these instructions, and your IGEL endpoint is ready to go. Okay, so if we move just a couple more pages here, let me get back to that. Okay, and then on your IGEL endpoint, you're going to see what's going on. You can see we launched session here, and in this case, we're running an EMR practice management little module that our virtual user is interacting with. Okay. And then after you do that, you just create some virtual users and then create your first test. I showed you some of those bits, creating a workflow and then picking the connection you would like to make, whether it's Citrix, Hyper-V, or a number of other Citrix or Horizon, and then another bunch of other custom connections that you can use. So for somebody like me and for some of our folks that have used Login Enterprise a few times, you can be up and running in your first hour. So if you've never used it before, it might take an hour or two. But the idea here is that we're trying to make this super easy for you so that you can give it a try and find some success really quick in order to determine the value that you're going to get out of this and the value that you're going to get out of understanding these types of things about your environment. Okay. So with that said, the last thing is our call to action. So you could just go to Login VSI, click on the request demo button, and you'll get somebody like me or some of my other peers that can do a demo for you. We have some cool stuff like an ABD test kit. Like I showed you before, we have this new EUX score, real simple way to get a value of user experience and the satisfaction that your users would have. And then the VSI Max, which tells you very quickly, this is the most sessions that you can get on this before user experience falls off. And then lastly, we've published a new knowledge worker that uses all of the new Microsoft 365 apps and Edge. So this new knowledge worker is going to be a little more aggressive than maybe some of the old Office, 2016 tools and things like that. So really good to stay up to date with the latest and greatest. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christopher or Chris to do his thing. So let me stop sharing and I'll turn off my camera. I just want to thank you all for sticking with me through that one. So Chris, off to you.
Thanks, Blair. That was awesome. That's one of the best parts about my job is I get a chance to work with a lot of these, I'll point at it, IGEL ready vendors like Login VSI. We spent some time last week in Orlando at HIMSS, and you really get a chance, when we're at these booths where there's multiple solutions that IGEL sort of integrates with, you really get a chance to see where all this comes together. And so let me just pull up a couple things kind of where IGEL sort of fits in. Let me do that right now and we'll get started here. All right, so let's. So I've been in the EUC business for a long time, going back probably 15 years, and seeing the rise of this stuff. And I think what you saw today from Blair and just the advancement, right? When the ability to take a non-Windows device and get you to this really cool virtual desktop, when that began to emerge and everybody started talking about the year of VDI, a lot of other things sort of came out of that, right? Like all the other stuff that's involved behind the scenes from when Blair had it up earlier, the entire stack. Any one of those things could potentially cause an issue for users. And it really kind of came down to three things, right? If you're going to get to a virtual desktop, you're going to need an endpoint. And now that brings up questions around how do I manage that device? Is it secure? And at the end of the day, the user experience, because all this back end, really cool technology, especially now that we've got the cloud component, will really end up being nothing if the user can't do their job, or you have issues like what Blair mentioned, where they can't, check in patients or really can't operate. And then having cool tools where you can sort of proactively figure out, hey, we got an issue, we got to address it before the sun comes up or whatever it might be. From an IGEL perspective, one of the challenges that we have helped with is a variety of things, right? Having an operating system that is easy to manage. And we call that really sort of having the ultimate endpoint, being able to take our operating system, and regardless of where you are in the world, as Blair showed earlier, IGEL can be managed on devices that are literally all over the globe. And you can have a user experience, you can have different settings, and you can kind of control that. One of the use cases that I heard early on when I came to IGEL was a retail customer that had shops where you buy glasses and things, and they've got multiple types of brands out there. And they have one person, generally speaking, about a quarter of their time managing all that. And that's 30,000 devices worldwide in these different locations in different countries. And they have automated a lot of the management of that. And they basically have done things where, start up, shut down at different times of the day when the business is closing or opening. And so they've done a lot with API calls and that type of thing. And so, but having a platform that allows you to be able to do that. And so what I want to show you is sort of, what does that actually look like? So what you're looking at here should be a shadowing of a session. Can you guys see that? Just first of all, I'm going to say yes. Is that correct?
Yep, we can see it.
Yep, we see it fine.
So this is, imagine this is somebody's laptop, which it actually is. It's the IGEL UD Pocket configured on this device, and it's plugged into one of our ready vendors, which is an LG Gram in this case. I could unplug it and plug it into my 12-year-old laptop down here. It's an old Dell, and I'd get this same experience. But you can configure this device lots of different ways. There's your typical start menu. You can brand this. You can make it look like Windows for the user, but I can put icons on the desktop, taskbar. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But if I want to get to something like ABD, I've already got some pre-configured credentials, and so just to kind of show you what that user experience might look like, and I'm just logging in, loading that workspace, and then there's my virtual desktop in the sky. So so when it comes to the login VSI piece, a lot of what's behind the scenes, I'll just kind of pull up and you'll see how IGEL is managing Linux. And that's really, if you're not familiar with IGEL, I'll just kind of start there. Why is IGEL uppercase letters? It's an acronym. IGEL is Intelligent German Electronics. If you really spell that out in the German language, it's kind of long, about 3 football fields roughly. But it comes down to shrinking that down, and that word IGEL in German is Igel, and that's the word for hedgehog, and that's what our icon actually is, and our little mascot. So we've taken the concept of taking a lightweight, easier to manage operating system, Linux in this case, modularizing it, and then putting a tool in place to manage that, and that's the management tool, which I'll get to in just a second. And so conceptually, I'll show you kind of behind the scenes what's inside of the operating system, all these features, right? So we take the base operating system and then we add things like these clients, and the login VSI one is down here on this list. And so as I scroll down here, my mouse wants to behave. So that's all built in. And if I don't want certain things, I could turn it off, and that's just not there. But you can see we've got that client that's going to connect into that experience so they can run those launchers and do some testing on it. So behind the scenes, I'm going to show you how this device got that configuration. So I'm going to kill the shadow session. This is my device, and this is the management tool. So let me just kind of shrink this down for a second. If you're familiar with Active Directory and users and computers, we're really kind of not all that different. So let me just sort of minimize this for just a second. what's applied to the device is called a profile. In the world of Microsoft, that would be called a group policy setting. The devices, this is where your devices reside. This would be your OU structure. So there's a concept of a directory. And then this is where my device actually is currently residing. This is the one I was just shadowing. And as you might imagine, things kind of cascade down. And so if you look at where this device resides over here, what's assigned to that object? Well, I've got some top level, and I've got some other levels that it's inheriting those settings. If I click on the device, you can kind of see everything sort of indirectly assigned versus directly assigning an object to it. So I could take this and I could drag it or move it to another container. If I want to do some testing, for example, it's got a limited amount of settings in that particular directory, and it's easy to kind of do that. But this is where my device resides. And so if I want to set up this device to connect in and do some testing with Login VSI, maybe I just downloaded that virtual appliance and I'm working with Blair and his team or Zintegra to set that up. How do I make that magic happen? And so I'm going to show you how I would create a profile. And so this is just just so you can see how would I organize these things. And so our recommendation in some cases is that you break it down into the types of things that you're building. So if I create a new profile, for example, I'm going to base it off of a certain firmware. And the reason is because in various firmware builds, we have the components. And so this is the latest version, for example. And you'll see that when it comes up on the screen, it looks just like that same setup screen that I showed earlier when I was shadowing the device. And when inside there, I'm going to go into the accessories here, and you'll see when Windows decides to finish chasing its tail. There we go. So under accessories, down here, this login enterprise. So as Blair showed earlier, you get that you copy from that article, you copy the URL and the secret password, and then in order to connect into that thing, you have to pull down the certificate, which you apply to the device. But it's really very simple. You turn this on, you fill in the blanks, and then when you're done, you save the profile, and then you can drag and drop that or assign it to that directory. Or if I just want to assign it directly to the device, you just do that. So it's very simple in that regard. And then, so let me just go ahead and save this for now. And if I wanted to assign that, I would just click this plus sign and say, I want to stick it into this production. And I'm going to assign it to all my UD pockets. It's really that simple. Now this device is going to get that setting. It's going to, and then when you're ready, just going to start your testing, and you'll see that launcher kick off and begin doing all the automation pieces there. So with respect to time, I know we're down to just a few minutes, so I'm going to stop sharing. And I know we probably have some questions, hopefully, maybe not. I will kind of pause here and certainly available to answer questions as we go.
Thanks, Chris. I'm not seeing any questions coming up. If you guys have any questions, pop them in chat or in the Q&A. We can get those addressed for you now. So with that, if any questions come in, we'll address them. I just wanted to go along into the next side of the house. We have giveaways today. So 2 of you will be lucky winners with that. And then Kathy, if you want to help out now with our selection.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen right now so you can see the name picker that we have. Let's see. Everybody see my, here it is, share my screen. Where are you? Here we go.
Got it.
Okay, all right, so we are picking 2 winners, and thank you all for participating today. We've got a $100 gift card from IGEL and one from Login VSI, both $100. And so everybody's names are on here that participated. And so I am going to pick the random names right now. So we have Iram Y and Justin A. So congratulations. Yay.
Congratulations, you two.
All right, I will unshare my screen.
Okay, thanks. And gents, I am not seeing anything coming up from our question side of the house. So with that, what I could say is definitely if there are questions following up from this, please feel free. You know, we are here from Zintegra to help you out with the integration of both IGEL solution and with Login BSI, so we can help you out there. And yes, Erin, why?
Yes.
Sorry, that's the only question we had. That is you, Hiram. Congratulations. So with that said, if there are any questions that come up later on, please feel free and reach out, and welcome. And we appreciate you being here for another webinar Wednesday. Christopher, Blair, appreciate both of you taking your time to be here today.
My pleasure.
And everybody have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.